It has been about a year since Netflix's Cobra Kai concluded its final season. With that distance, the series offers an opportunity to reflect not just on its nostalgia or entertainment value, but on its deeper transnational implications. As a spin-off of the Karate Kid films from the 1980s, Cobra Kai positions itself as a story about redemption, generational conflict, and personal discipline. Yet, beneath its surface, celebration of martial arts lies a more complicated history, one shaped by US imperialism in the Asian Pacific that the show largely ignores. What makes Cobra Kai distinctive is that it is an American comedy drama whose story centers on East Asian martial arts traditions. Two primary styles anchor the series: Okinawan karate, which forms the philosophical foundation of Miyagi-Do, and Tang-Soo-Do, a traditional Korean martial art based on the styles of Okinawan karate, which serves as the basis for Cobra Kai's aggressive approach. On first glance, the show presents itself as an act of cultural appreciation. Karate is framed as a foreign tradition that Americans respectfully learn from, preserve, and pass on. Discipline, balance, and self-control are emphasized as universal virtues, suggesting that martial arts functions as a bridge between cultures. A key example of this framing appears in Season 5, Episode 7, Taikai, where both Miyagi-Do and Cobra Kai demonstrate their training methods to representatives of the Sekai Taikai, a prestigious international karate tournament. Miyagi-Do's presentation foregrounds tradition. Students perform chores to develop muscle memory, train in dojo style like an Okinawan garden, and explicitly acknowledge the art's lineage passed down through Mr. Miyagi. Cobra Kai, by contrast, presents a sleek, modern dojo aesthetic, black gis, digital technology, and an emphasis on offense. Despite their stylistic differences, both dojos portray karate as an empowering practice that builds character and discipline. Yet, the scene ultimately frames karate as a vehicle for American pride and global recognition rather than as a tradition shaped by historical struggle. This tension becomes even clearer in the show's final season, during the Sekai Takai tournament. Miyagi-Do competes under the American flag, while Cobra Kai, Miyagi-Do's rival, is represented under the Korean flag. Here, cultural appreciation begins to slide into cultural appropriation, and even exoticization when taking into account that our protagonist is American and the enemy as Asian. East Asian martial arts are nationalized, commodified, and transformed into symbols of US achievement. Karate is no longer rooted in Okinawan or Korean histories, but repackaged as an American export, an instrument of US nationalism on the global stage. In this process, the violent conditions that enable these cultural transfers are erased. Cobra Kai consistently oversimplifies how East Asian martial arts entered American popular culture. What goes largely unacknowledged is the role of US military occupation in the Asian Pacific, particularly in places like Okinawa and South Korea, which continues to host extensive US military bases. The Americanization of karate reflects a broader pattern. Cultural practices are detached from their origins, stripped of political context, and absorbed into US consumer culture. This disconnection is not accidental. It is a symptom of US colonial history in the region. The show briefly gestured towards this history through the backstory of Sensei John Kreese, though it ultimately fails to interrogate it. In Season 3, Episode 6, King Cobra, Kreese is stationed in Vietnam, where he is recruited into an elite unit by Captain Turner. It is here that Kreese is first exposed to Tang Soo-Do, which Turner learned during the Korean War from Kim Sun-young. Martial arts knowledge is transmitted directly through US military conflict, not peaceful cultural exchange. The purpose is explicit. These techniques are learned for combat and survival in war. Later in the show, Season 5, Episode 7, Bad Eggs deepens this narrative. After traumatic experience in Vietnam, John Kreese and future co-sensei Terry Silver travel to Korea to train directly under Master Kim Sun-young himself. Silver's wealth allows him to institutionalize this knowledge by funding Cobra Kai, turning Korean martial art into a commercialized American dojo. His dream of global expansion through the Sekai Takai mirrors real histories of US cultural dominance. Yet, the show treats these events as personal backstories rather than as evidence of imperial power shaping cultural flows. To understand what Cobra Kai omits, it helps to turn to historical scholarship in Working the Sub-Empire. Simeon Mann explains how Asian cultures circulated through US empire during the Cold War. South Korea and the Philippines, for instance, were integrated into US military and economic systems, with their participation in war framed as a path toward modernization and prosperity. Mann mentions, as one ROK foreign minister told Park, Vietnam was a battlefield, but it was also a market to be exploited. The Normalization Treaty, in short, solidified the ROK sub-empire by integrating South Korea into the East Asian capitalist economy and facilitating South Korean militarism in Vietnam, all in the name of national economic development. Page 112. Asian allies were not passive victims, but were incorporated into the US-led capitalist order that depended on militarization. This context complicates the idea that martial arts simply arrived in America through admiration or curiosity. Instead, they moved through structures of power, coercion, and economic incentive. This imperial legacy continues today, as evidently Espiritu Gandhi shows in Trans-Pacific Archipelagic Poetics. Her work on Okinawa and Guahan reveals how U.S. military presence is often justified through narratives of economic benefit and liberation, even as it imposes long-term harm on indigenous populations. This framing of the U.S. military occupation of Okinawa as beneficial to its people served as a way to cover up various acts of violence to the local community. Here's one such example mentioned by Gandhi. On September 4th, 1995, three U.S. servicemen stationed at Camp Hassan in Okinawa assaulted a 12-year-old Okinawan girl, sparking a mass mobilization of Okinawan anti-base activism. Such mobilization was but the culmination of a much longer history of Okinawan anti-base protests, which originated in 1945 following the construction of Kadena Air Base during the U.S. occupation of Okinawa. Page 133. Gratitude toward the U.S. military becomes a means of normalizing occupation. Now, how does this event and Gandhi's piece relate to Cobra Kai? It demonstrates the reality of the effects of U.S. occupation of Okinawa and other U.S. occupied regions in the Asian Pacific, in which colonial violence and opposition from indigenous communities continues to exist, in contrast to the common narrative taught to the U.S. that the U.S. helped provide development, security, and cultural exchange to Okinawa and similar places. This mirrors Cobra Kai's narrative strategy. By framing martial arts as a gift freely shared with Americans, the show obscures the unequal power relations that made such sharing possible. Cobra Kai presents East Asian martial arts as a symbol of inclusivity, discipline, and global awareness within American society. But when viewed through a transnational lens, this integration appears less like a genuine cultural respect and more like an extension of U.S. hegemony. By erasing the histories of war, occupation, and colonial violence that facilitate these cultural exchanges, the show transforms martial arts into an apolitical commodity. Understanding this context allows us to see Cobra Kai not just as entertainment, but as a reflection of how American pop culture continues to absorb Asian traditions while forgetting the imperial conditions that made that absorption possible.